Are you struggling to attract lots of candidates when you're hiring? Maybe it's because your usual hiring methods are missing the mark. Too many businesses are stuck using old school criteria and processes that just don't cut it anymore. They end up overlooking people who could bring fresh, innovative ideas because they don't fit the standard profile. And that means missing out on the kind of talent that could really shake things up. So what's the fix? That's exactly what we're going to be diving into today. We're joined by Chloe Britnell, a partner at PJCO Chartered Accountants and winner of Top 50 Women in Accounting, despite having come from outside the accounting industry because she previously worked as a design consultant at B&Q. Now, Chloe's made a name for herself by stepping away from the norm and embracing diversity when it comes to hiring to get some really amazing results. So I'm going to ask her to share how she spots and cultivates extraordinary talent from perhaps the most unlikely places. She's going to share some of her success stories of her hires and give tips for anyone that's ready to try something new with their hiring strategy. Welcome to De-Stress Your Business, the podcast where we show you how to get incredible results in your business without constant stress. I'm Alexis Kingsbury, a serial entrepreneur and founder at AirManual, and I'm joined by the brilliant Chloe Britnell. Welcome to the podcast, Chloe.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Well, let's start with perhaps something that's perhaps a bit surprising. You had a non-traditional start for an accounting career where you started in the arts and then have had a stellar rise in accounting.
Well, so, if you say so, I guess, but yeah.
Well, you know, you're a partner in an accounting firm after not that long in the accounting industry. You won Top 50 Women in Accounting. Like, that feels pretty stellar to me, but help us understand your career journey. Like, what was the catalyst that sparked your interest in making such a significant career change?
Yeah, I think that we really need to boil it back down to kind of when I was growing up, because I think that I rebelled against the numbers in my blood until I was 21. My dad is a financial advisor. My mum is a bookkeeper. She actually quit doing her AAT when she fell pregnant with me. So I think that really the numbers and the accounting was always there. I just suppressed it and wanted to do something that I thought was more fun. Now I'm here, it actually is a lot more fun than I thought it would be. But so when I needed to leave college and go into the big wide world, I really wanted to be a film critic. That was what I wanted to do. So I went to university, did a film degree, basically realised there's no money in film criticism because a lot of people do it on YouTube for free. Yeah. So then was like, well, what do I do next? I had worked at B&Q whilst I was at uni to pay the bills and kind of give me my beer money for my Saturday nights and things like that. So I worked my way up a little bit to become the design consultant there because I really liked making it look pretty. It looked like I was using The Sims to kind of design people's kitchens. It was great fun, but it wasn't really the career for me. I wanted something that I could be sold to and progress and have that clear progression of an industry, which I feel like accounting has. So yeah, I made the plunge, kind of following mum and dad's footsteps, and it's kind of worked. So I'm kind of pleased that I did it.
Oh, that's fantastic. And your switch from one industry to another and so on, that wasn't something that, my understanding is, that wasn't something that you did completely outside of PJCO and then came fully formed as an accountant and so on.
No.
PJCO were hiring and were more open to people from different backgrounds. Can you talk a bit about what their approach was back then?
Yeah. And it's, to be honest, it's still the same approach that we have now. It's very much a kind of looking for the right person, but not necessarily someone that's already got the skills. What we've found is that we can train anyone to be an accountant if they have those people skills to be able to converse with our clients and build those relationships. I feel like with the technology that we've developed within our industry, the relationship's really the bit that matters to our clients. So if we can teach them how to do a tax computation, how to use the different softwares to present to HMRC and the client what they need to see, as long as they've got that personality inside and that kind of ability to build relationships, that's all you really need from a hire, to be honest.
That's amazing. And it's really interesting because I think that in the industry, and this applies to many industry, but I've seen it directly in the accountant industry, where most businesses are doing the opposite. Most practices are looking for people with knowledge, experience, qualifications, and so on in the area of doing the
Yeah.
either the bookkeeping or the accounting or the tax or the whatever,
Yeah.
and then are finding it really frustrating if they don't have those client relationship management skills, communication skills, and so on.
Yeah.
And then find that really hard as an area that they say, but this isn't an area that we're amazing at. So now
No.
training people to do that is really difficult. Whereas you're
Yeah.
taking the opposite approach, and PJCO is taking that approach of saying, actually, let's take people with the skills that we need,
Yeah.
and then we can give them some of that knowledge and experience around the tools and the steps, which is something I've been passionately
Yeah,
arguing in
no,
all sorts of industries.
absolutely. And so have I in the accounting industry, because I feel like if my CV had come across I applied to other accountancy firms. When you're applying as a fresh graduate, you're going to be applying to many. And I wasn't being given interviews because I didn't have that experience on my CV. There was nothing, there was no work experience, there was no qualification that kind of matched the industry at all. I'd stopped doing maths at GCSE. Like I had nothing that was really kind of related. But I had the people skills and I had the passion and the drive. And I think that that's the main thing. At PJCO, what we like to say is that we are the GPs of small businesses. So we kind of solve the problems for those clients in our local area. And to do that, yes, you need to have that accounting knowledge. You need to have an understanding of the HMRC legislation. But what you need to be able to do is decipher what the HMRC legislation is and explain it to a business owner in the way that they're going to understand. So you need to be able to have those people skills, the communication skills, the English kind of breakdown, rather than exactly all of the knowledge to start. We found that if we hire people that have accounting experience, we still need to train them, because we need to train them on the software that we use, because there's so many different software options now that you're not going to just get someone that's ready made, can slot in, they know what they're doing straight away. You've still got to have an onboarding process, you've still got to have a training process. So why don't you do that with someone who's outside of the industry and just needs a chance and just needs an opportunity?
Oh, I completely agree. So you're now responsible for hiring within CO. So like that's something, those approaches, those processes are things that you're carrying on. So if we dive in a little bit more then, so actually it'd be great if you could talk us through the recruitment process that you currently use and the kind of stages, and then we'll perhaps dive into what we're looking for at each stage and what are the skills, the qualities that you're looking for that signal they might be the right fit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that we do, because we hire a lot of people that are apprentices, because obviously we're looking for personality rather than skill. We go into the local colleges. I've done a lot of talks there about apprenticeships versus university and things like that. And those local colleges, we can kind of get under the skin of some of these young people who they like maths at school, but they don't really understand what accounting is. They don't understand, they think it's just behind a desk, they think it's just numbers. So it's really inspiring and giving that like passion to the younger people in those colleges or schools. So that's kind of like where the recruitment process starts for us. Going forward from that, when we think about like CVs that are presented to us, we're actually looking more for people that have worked in either retail or hospitality or those kinds of roles. I've hired in the last 2 years people that have been snowboard instructors, which is fantastic, right? Because they have worked with people, they've had to teach people, they know how to kind of communicate in different ways. They've had to learn different communication methods to be able to teach different people who learn in different ways. People that have worked in pubs, if you're able to tell someone that they've had too much alcohol and they're not going to have another drink in the pub, that's also something that's really good because they've got that strength behind them. You need to be a trusted advisor as an accountant. So you need to be able to communicate and be strong in your opinion and be decisive. So that's something that we look for. And again, like I say, retail experience. I feel like, to be honest, in any industry, some retail experience is kind of like a rite of passage. Dealing with the general public is something that's going to stand you in good stead for any career going forwards. But particularly with us, because we like people to rip that plaster off and have client contact from day one so that they don't become book smart but not reality smart in terms of the industry, we need them to have that kind of client interaction from previous roles, so they've already kind of made the mistakes and learned from it and that sort of thing.
Interesting. So as a result, in the first stage of that recruitment process, they have to submit a CV, and then specifically what you're looking for is that they've had some experience of client interaction. And
Yeah.
do you have a typical, like, where do you draw the line? How much experience and
It
so
doesn't
on?
have to be a lot. Yeah, it doesn't
Okay.
have to be a lot because some of these, it's like we've hired some people who've only been 16, so their experience has been very small. It might have been like a Saturday working on the tills at Tesco's, and that might have only been for a couple of months, but that's still something that means they've
Mm-hmm.
understood when to get to work on time, how to get to work on time, those sorts of things as well. They really matter when we're thinking about our apprentices. But then when we think about that client interaction, they've had those communications, they've been asked questions that they've had to answer. They understand that clients are going to have those sorts of things, and it makes that big difference. If there's a role where they've had to be speaking on the phone, that's really useful as well, because we find that a lot of people that start, if they haven't had that experience, they get really nervous of it. So it's those sorts of things that we're looking for when we're hiring.
Interesting. And so before we go into the other stage of the process where you're then, really checking that they're going to be smart enough to be able to take on what you're going to teach them, and that they have developed the people skills as a result of the experience that they've theoretically gained. That early assessment, I'm interested because I did a podcast episode a long time ago for De-Stress Your Business where I talked about don't use CVs as part of your screening, and I talk about why that is and so on. And so I'm intrigued as to what else you're looking for, because hypothetically, I could argue, like, why don't we just have an application form that says, do you have experience in some form of customer facing role? Yes, no, or yes, here's the amount of time. And then you just draw a line, because particularly because in your
Yeah.
own recruitment process, you're casting the net so wide, which I support
Yeah.
and think is fantastic. So is there something that I'm missing there? Is it that actually there's something else that you're looking for in the CVs? Or have we just
Yeah.
identified a way in which you can make the first stage in your process more efficient?
No, I think that what I haven't necessarily touched on is that the exam results that they've got in GCSEs
Right.
and or A levels or whatever they've done are really important. I'm not necessarily going to turn someone away if they've just had a bad day, but because of the kind of level of work that goes into the exams with ACCA, which is what we recruit for nine
Yep.
times out of 10, we need someone that's kind of got that exam experience and knows how to study and knows how to work hard. They might be in completely irrelevant courses, but if they've been able to come away with decent scores, it shows that they've got that right kind of level of dedication to them. So that's kind of the other side of the coin when we're thinking about, they've got to have that life experience, they've got to have that kind of client experience, but they've also got to be decent enough at exams to be able to make the apprenticeship work for them. It feels like it would be very unfair to just hire someone who, because they can talk to someone, when then might not necessarily, they might struggle through the ACCA.
Yes. Yeah, I can see that. So yeah, you're working backwards from, given what they're going to need to be able to do in the role, what
Yeah.
are the skills that they need to be able to demonstrate, including first client facing and client interaction and relationships and so on, but actually second, an ability to study and be able
Yeah.
to then perform in that setup, given that at some point, if they're going to take an accounting qualification, that's exactly what they're going to need to do. And in fact, do
Yeah.
it alongside work, which
Exactly. It's
can
even
make it more
harder.
effective.
It's even harder. Like you'll see some people that have done like 12 amazing GCSE results, but they didn't work through it because they were just living at home, they didn't need to, or they were under 16 and they didn't have an NI number and all those sorts of things. So really you need to see someone who's kind of had a part-time job whilst they've been doing their A levels, because that's a really good tell to say that they've been able to balance their time, they've got that kind of understanding between like different priorities, and that's something that's really fundamental to the apprenticeship. You're working full-time and you're
Yeah.
studying, you've got an exam every 3 months, it's intense, it's not easy. And on top of that, they've also then got to find the priorities for when they actually have passed all their exams. And then it's kind of spinning all the different plates for all the different clients they're serving and those sorts of things. So being able to prioritize tasks is really important as well.
Nice, fantastic. So once you've identified that in that first stage that, yeah, it looks like they've got sufficient client-facing experience and also demonstrated that, yeah, they're likely to be able to do well in exams, so we're going to take them to the next stage in the process. What are you then doing in that next stage, and what are you looking for?
So 9 times out of 10, if they're hitting those kind of requirements from like a first interview and they've been able to sit and chat to us for an hour, that's kind of like our final pass, as it were. Like if they can sit and chat about different stuff, not just about what the job is and what they're excited by, it's things like what they're interested in outside of work. And you kind of just have a chat with them to know whether they can talk to someone for an hour because that's
Yeah.
what they're going to need to be doing with a client. Then we kind of give them an opportunity to come in and just see if they fit and see if they fit with our culture and with our clients, because that's the only way you're ever really going to know. You can't just base it on 1 hour's conversation and one piece of paper in black and white where they've just written a load of results and a couple of work
Agreed.
experience things. They need to come in and get their hands dirty. So we do have a 3 months probation before we put any kind of apprenticeship in place, because we only really hire apprentices. So that's kind of what we're hiring them to do. We're hiring them for kind of a course essentially. So we have our 3 month probation, at which point we have touch points with them regularly, like once a week, once a fortnight, to make sure that they're enjoying what they're doing, because that's really important to us, that they actually enjoy it and that they see it as their career, and that they're kind of keeping up with the pace, because that's the next thing that's really important. If they're not learning quickly enough, they're going to struggle, like I say, through that apprenticeship where it's those exams every 3 months. It's an intense process, so they need to be able to pick up the knowledge quite quickly.
Awesome. And so there's a few things I want to pick up on there. So first thought is, it actually seems like quite a short process. I mean, particularly given I've done episodes in the podcast. I think there's around 24 to 33. There's various episodes there around recruitment onboarding. But I remember in one particular one, we kind of go through what are the stages that we have in our recruitment process. And in fact, I'm recruiting right now for a software developer. We have 7 stages in the process, right? And that will include 3 different types of interview and then a test project at the end and so on. But it's interesting because partly you're able to do it the way that you're doing it because the level that you require is so different. Because you're going to be providing so much of what they need through training, and not just any training, but through an apprenticeship, which is a significant piece of study. It allows you to truncate some of that recruitment process, which is cool.
Absolutely. Like if we sat and did them a test, like they wouldn't be able to answer any of the questions, because that's the whole point, right? They know nothing, and that's absolutely fine. That's what we expect. We're expecting them to come in and know nothing. I'd rather be able to mold them into the person that I want them to be and the skills that they need to fit in our culture and fit in the way that we work. That just feels so much more natural to me than hiring someone outside of the industry and having to try and force the knowledge that they've got into our mold and into our culture.
Nice. And on that sort of cultural fit side, how do you evaluate their fit against the culture and the values? Because there's always a risk as soon as you get to, interviews and so on, the less structure there is, the more the risk there is for bias and inconsistency, depending on who's conducting it and so on. So how do you make sure that you're able to provide that consistency and make sure that you're really assessing for the core values that make up your culture?
Yeah, I think it is really whether they can talk to someone for an hour. And I know that sounds like such a small, insignificant kind of like test, as it were. But if they can hold a conversation with it's kind of going in different directions and different things are being spoken about, and they can think on their feet to be able to answer those questions, then they're kind of going to be able to fit our culture. Our culture is that we've got this strong relationship to our clients. We build those relationships to a level where we understand their wants, their needs, their desires, etc. So they need to be able to ask questions, they need to be inquisitive, they need to be able to answer questions, and all of those things that kind of build out that hour's conversation. And so that's kind of where that culture comes into it. And then when we're in the office, it's then kind of, okay, are they making relationships with the team? Are they answering the phone? Are they scared of answering the phone when the phone rings? Are they answering emails quickly? Are they when they're answering an email, is it just please send me your bank statements, or is it, oh, did you have a lovely weekend, and oh, you told me last week you were getting a puppy and what's its name, and etc. And like building that relationship, that's really important. Nice. So it's thinking outside of the box rather than just this is the task, I'm going to do it, I'm a robot. No, I'm a human being and my client's a human being as well.
Yeah, I love that. And what's really interesting is when you start with that description, you say, oh, well, it's just holding a conversation for an hour. And yet when you then describe the behaviors that you're actually looking for, like the inquisitive nature, the asking questions, the probing, the following the conversation as it goes, and then, as you say, when you're then getting them involved in the office, what you're expecting to see in emails, what you're expecting to, like all of those things are that little area of detail, those behaviors that link back to the values, that link back to what your culture is and what you're trying to provide as your USP. And it was actually in the last episode of this podcast in in episode 142, which I spoke to Kelvin Geck. We talked in detail about like going from, yes, you want your processes to embed your values and so on, but actually, it comes right up to the top. It comes right to that mission and your values, and you then thread that through. And I think this is a really nice example where, because you're so clear that your USP, your culture, is that relationship with the clients and that professional but friendly and supportive relationship, means that you're then able to work out exactly what you look for, which I think is really, really powerful. So that's cool. I think the other thing I want to check is, you said that then we bring them in and we have the probation period. I've seen other businesses, and particularly in accountancy practices, a lack of essentially continued selection and performance management of people once they're in the door. There's kind of an assumption, oh, well, you're here now, done. And as a result, a lot of businesses end up with people that they should have been pulling back out again because it wasn't the right fit much, much sooner. How are you making sure that they're the right fit? What are the review points? How do you make sure that it just doesn't become like oh yeah, they seem fine enough? And as a result, what percentage do you find that you're typically then going, actually, this hasn't worked out, and out they come again?
Yeah, so there's like two schools of thought here. One is that we are actually a platinum approved employer with ACCA, which essentially means that our apprentices don't have to complete what they're called PERS. I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but essentially it's part of the work experience requirement for the ACCA qualification. Okay. And as a result of that, because they don't have to complete that, what we have to do is have internal records of quarterly meetings with each of our apprentices to explain kind of what they're meeting, whether they've learned certain things, whether they've achieved certain things in terms of their career progression. So because of that, we have this quarterly catch up with all of our apprentices in order to kind of keep those records to essentially rubber stamp their qualification. If we haven't done that, they can't qualify. So the whole process was completely redundant anyway. What we've done is we've built out what's called a schedule of competency. And so the apprenticeship lasts over 3 years, and year 1 is all about knowledge, year 2 is about application, and year 3 is about advisory. And so what we're trying to achieve is making sure that each person, by the time they finish year 1, they're able to achieve 1 to 50. And if they can't achieve 1 to 50, why not? Is that our fault? Have we dropped the ball? Have we not trained them on something we were supposed to have done because the person training them was too busy or whatever? Or is it their fault because it's just not something that comes naturally to them, and it's not going to be something that they're ever going to be able to pick up? So that's kind of where we're picking up on those people that aren't able to kind of follow the process through to the end and actually fit properly with the culture and fit with our kind of mission as a whole. When we're then talking about kind of like our fall off rate, it's been worse of the last couple of years. And I think the main reason being is that we've seen a decline in the quality of applicants that we've had. And I think the main reason being that a lot of these people have had some kind of schooling through COVID from home. They haven't necessarily had some of the opportunities to have that client-facing work that we were necessarily looking at before, because some businesses were shut for a period of time. So we have seen a decline in that kind of quality, and therefore have seen an increase in the drop-off rate. So I think of maybe in the last 18 months, we've taken on maybe about 10, of which maybe 4 or 5 haven't seen it through their probation period. And that is far higher than we'd want it to be. Obviously, it's far higher than any business would want it to be. But we also want to make sure that the people that are here and are working hard and are achieving the kind of that schedule and the competencies we need them to be achieving can see that we're investing in them because they're investing back. And we don't want them to see that there are people that maybe aren't going to help carry the weight and help them kind of progress together. We progress as a team. We can't progress as individuals and let everyone else kind of float and just along for the ride. Everyone needs to progress together.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I love that so much, that firstly, that you've got that process in place, the quarterly reviews and so on. It's interesting. I think only at the point of this episode going out, I think it probably means about 3, maybe 4 episodes ago, I was talking about what are the structures you need in place so that you're supporting managing your team. How do you make it easy for your managers to, how do you get the best out of your managers and so on? So I had a few episodes about that. And one of the things we talked about is performance reviews, and particularly quarterly performance reviews, which I see so rarely in the accountancy industry generally. I mean, in business generally, it's often not done, but for whatever reason, I'm finding in the accountancy practices, it's done even less. And so I love the fact that that you are doing them. And you alluded to the fact that after their probation period, they move from quarterly, presumably, to annual reviews, because you're
they'll still be on quarterly.
They're still quarterly.
Yeah.
Love it even more. Brilliant. Excellent. So you are doing quarterly reviews. And as a result, you're getting that opportunity to assess them against a clarity around framework, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
But presumably also checking against your values and making sure you haven't got concerns on that, so that you're pulling people out. And exactly for the right reasons, right? Because you want to build an amazing team, and your A players shouldn't be in a situation where they feel like they're having to carry the weight of others, because otherwise you'll keep your worst people and lose your best ones. So I think that's absolutely spot on.
And also, just to add as well, that quarterly review, we've got to remember that all of our team are learning something, right? They're not just here for a job, a 9 to 5, they're here to build a career. And so that quarterly review gives them an opportunity to come to us and say, okay, so Isla next to me was learning this yesterday. I really want to be doing that. Or I haven't seen that yet. Give it to me. Like it keeps them hungry, and it keeps them interested and invested, because they can see that we're having that touch point where they have an opportunity to speak up just as much as we do. And I think that that's just as important with that quarterly review. An annual review is not often enough to give them the opportunity to gain what they need, not just you being able to review them as the manager.
Oh, completely agree. That's awesome. And for me, it's awesome because obviously I talk about it a lot, and yet it's often hard, aside from my direct clients, it's hard to find accountancy practices and other businesses that have been doing it regularly. So it's great that you share that. So thank you. I'm interested. You mentioned that now broadly it's around kind of 50% of those that start the probationary period are then kept on, and the other 50% not. You mentioned that it's got worse recently. What was it previously? What kind of percentage were previously?
Like 80-90%.
Cool.
Like, really high.
That's what I had in my head, is like you probably don't want it to be, you almost don't expect it to be 100%, because that almost suggests, have we got, are we setting the bar high enough? So I was thinking, 80-90% feels like you are taking action, and that you are, because it's demonstrated by removing people. That's great. Clearly going through this approach has been a game changer for the organization. You've continually had to shift, and in fact, as you mentioned, you've got a recent example where you're finding that the quality has dropped. What are some of the changes that you've been making to then overcome that? Because I guess even for you're having to cast the net wider.
Yeah, so until 18 months ago, we were just hiring for ACCA. So that would be normally graduates that had done any kind of degree. We'd had some people that had done history, some people that had done sports science, some people had done biology. It literally could have been any degree, but as long as it was a decent enough score, like I was talking about earlier, it didn't really matter. I had done English literature and film, so really it literally could be anything. But now we found that because that pool isn't becoming as fruitful as we were hoping or had been experiencing before, we've had to cast that net wider, and we've started offering AAT apprenticeships as well. So that's kind of bringing it forward from that 21 university graduate to, we had someone start with us last year who was 16, got his GCSE results the week after he started with us, and has now kind of going to follow through. So he's just about to finish his level 3 and start level 4 AAT. Once he completes that, if he completes it successfully, we've got him to sign on to do ACCA. So we've essentially got him for 6 years doing a degree apprenticeship. He's going to walk away with not a penny of debt, because he's not going to have his student loan that other people have. He's been paid to do the work, and he'll come out with a chartered accountancy qualification. But he's fantastic. And it's not because of the knowledge he came to us with. It's because he's eager to learn, he's excited. And he looks at himself and compared to some of his mates that are still at college, and he thinks, well, I'm living the life of Riley here. I've got my course. I'm working full time. I've got experience. And I feel like I'm in the adult world. I'm not at college like my friends are. So it's great.
That's fantastic. And I think that concept of casting the net wide is so crucial when you're looking to get decent talent. Like the more options you've got, the better a chance you have. I'm interested in the impact on application numbers, because I see a lot of business owners who say, oh yeah, it's so hard to hire. And I'll say, well, you know, how many people are you getting in at the top of the funnel? Like how many applications are you getting? And it's like single digits. And it's like, well, of course you're struggling to find great people. You haven't got enough people on top of the funnel to do that. Typically, how many are you looking for to apply before you're looking at, okay, we should stand a good chance of getting a decent candidate?
Yeah, so what's really weird with our process, and I probably should have said this earlier, is we don't necessarily advertise like other firms might. Purely because we feel like if we send an advert out, we'll get 50 random dead leads that aren't necessarily the people we're looking for. So we actually, when we're thinking about that like initial recruitment process, it's when we're going into the schools and colleges and we're talking to these young people, or we're kind of casting the net that way, going into the universities, speaking to them and kind of capturing those eager to learn students. That's the bit that we're looking for and where we're getting them, rather than just putting something out on Indeed or Reed and getting a load of applicants. We had one advert we did put out because the local college came to us to say that they had a lot of places at their course. They wanted to kind of use us as one of their placements. We had 80 applicants or something ridiculous, and one person ended up being Anyworth.
Yeah.
And so it seems like a waste of our time to be sifting through all these CVs. Also, we like the majority of the people that have started over the last few years that have been our really fantastic kind of hires have come to us. They've emailed us saying, I really want to get into accounting. I can see you guys do apprenticeships. I can see you guys do offer career progression. Is there any openings at the moment? And then we might not even necessarily have a natural opening, but if they come in for a chat and they're fantastic, I'm not going to turn them away. No way, because they'll help us grow next year, right? That year of investment means that next year we'll have someone that can kind of really give back. And that's the place that we start more than just setting out a job application online.
Oh, I think that's really, really interesting. I think the fact that you're going so proactively, I think is really unusual, and includes a lot of best practices that I've seen from, books like How to Hire A Players by Eric Herrencole, where like if you want to get these A players, you can't just sit and wait. You do have to go out there. You do have to always be looking for these amazing people. And even if you haven't got a vacancy right now, like be earmarking them so that you, in that particular book, it talks about putting them on the bench or the farm team, where you're keeping in contact so that at the point that you've got a vacancy, then you can snap them up. I like the fact that your attitude is one of investment and growth, where you say, well, actually, even if we haven't got a vacancy, I'm okay with the cost, given that if this is a great candidate, I don't want to miss out on them, and I'm willing to invest in them, which I think is fantastic. I think it's also interesting that, as you said, when you did do an advert, you got 80 candidates and got one that was any good, which is interesting because you said that, it's not worth the sifting time, which is one of the reasons I don't recommend CVs, because for a role that I've got at the moment, it's been open about 4 days. I've got about 400 applicants.
Yeah.
But we have the process and so on that we have means it takes seconds for the applications to be reviewed. So as a result, that's fine. And so we cast the net super wide, and we'll get, for a developer role, we might get 2,500 applicants so that we can pick the right ones. But I think people's expectation of, I'll get 10 CVs and I'll be able to hire an amazing person is so out of whack with the reality.
Yes, absolutely.
I think the lowest I've ever done for a decent role was 50 at the top of the funnel. And I was surprised at the quality that was coming in at that early stage, and therefore felt comfortable with what we got at the end. But I think a lot of business owners are setting the bar so low in terms of what they look for at the top of the funnel, right? And it's so nice to see what you're talking about. One thing that I want to also pick up on is, what are the other benefits that you've seen from having such a diverse set of backgrounds and perspectives that people are bringing to the team? Because it doesn't matter where they might have come from in your case, and indeed what they may have studied. Have you seen a knock-on impact of that?
Absolutely. So what we've found is the kind of industries that we serve can kind of grow a bit. So like I obviously did a film degree before I was an accountant. I've got a lot of clients that I work with that work in film production or in media or app design and those sorts of things because I understand what they're trying to achieve with their business. I can sit in front of them, actually talk about what they're doing. And so if you've got a kind of diverse previous experience that's nothing to do with accounting, that still can be brought forward into those relationships and into the clients that you serve. If you've worked in a cafe, you understand when you look at a cafe's set of accounts, what's going on, the reality of what's happening, the reality that there is a cash flow actually sat in the till. Yes, there is. There will be £200 of cash. It's like some of those things that some of these 16, 17-year-olds won't necessarily have experienced. They don't have that life experience. But if they've worked in some of those industries or they've studied in some of those industries, that's where the experience is coming from.
Fantastic. I love that. I think that's so smart, and particularly I think as service industries generally, but I'm particularly seeing this in the accounting industry, are moving much more towards value add. You know, the ability to provide advisory and coaching, consulting and accountability and all these sorts of things rather than just doing the numbers. And so, of course, what you're describing plays perfectly into that hand, right? Have you seen that now from some of those staff those team members that have been with you longer? Are you starting to see that, their ability to coach, to advise and so on is just at another level?
Absolutely, because business advisory is such a broad term in itself, right? So you're not just talking about kind of thinking about tax planning, or you're not thinking about like how to make the profits look better and that sort of thing. You're not thinking about numbers that underpins all of the conversations, but it's actually about talking to that client and understanding what they want. What I find with business advisory is the client knows all the answers. They just need you to ask the right questions. And if you don't have any knowledge of that industry, how do you know the right questions to ask? So that's where it all kind of comes from. And so, when I'm sat in front of a film studio client, I know what questions to ask. I know like whether to ask them, do you need to invest in new kit because your kit might be getting old and it might not be fit for purpose anymore, and those sorts of things, because I've got that kind of underpinning knowledge. Might not necessarily be something that one of my other team members would ask because they have never used it, they've never worked in it, they've never like touched it tangibly, etc. So it makes a massive difference when you want your client to trust you. So you need to be able to show that you can be trusted.
Nice. Really, really good. Fantastic. Well, I'm now going to dive into some quick fire questions with you, Chloe. So one sentence answers only to these. So first question is, what one thing causes most stress for you?
The thing that causes me most stress would be the balance between training and client work and client experience. Because I want to invest in training and I want to invest in my team and give them everything. But I also need to balance that with serving the clients to be able to afford to train the team and give them everything that I want to give them.
Nice. And what's the most important thing to look for with a potential employee?
I think the most important thing in a potential employee is them being able to communicate in different ways and in different styles, because all of your clients will have a different communication need, and so they need to be able to fit that.
What's the most common red flag that you see when assessing candidates that you're on the lookout for?
It's got to be, I want to be an accountant because I love maths. That's a red flag. It's not all about the numbers, it's more about the relationships. So if you're doing it just because you love maths, that's not enough.
Nice. What's the one thing that you want business leaders to take away from this episode?
Invest in the next generation. I think they're ready and they're eager and they're excited, but it's just about giving them the opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chloe. Well, I'll make sure that we link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. We'll also link to PJCO, which is peterjarman.com, I believe, gets us there. So we'll make sure to link to that. Anything else we should link to in the show notes?
No, I don't think so. I think that's probably it. Our careers page and stuff's there. So all of the information should be there.
Fantastic. Love that. And if anyone's looking to improve their recruitment processes and performance reviews and all those sorts of things that we've talked about, and particularly because I met Chloe when I interviewed her as part of a panel at the ACCA Roadshow on processes. So naturally, she was there because this is something that she's good at. But I appreciate that most people haven't got these sort of processes in place. Don't worry, I've got a load of best practice templates that you can start with. We've got playbooks on this sort of stuff. So do just email me, alexis.kingsbury@airmanual.co. Let me know the challenge that you're facing. If it's whether it's performance reviews, recruitment, whatever, let me know and we can send you over some templates that you can use as a starting point, playbooks if we've already developed them that cover exactly how to implement it in your business. And if appropriate, we can even link to some podcasts to help you. So don't worry, you don't need to start from a blank page. But thank you so much, Chloe, for joining me. You've been absolutely fantastic. To everyone else, thanks so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please do share it on social media and tag me and Chloe in. We'd really, really appreciate it. But otherwise, until next time, have fun.